going on, everybody? Bones back in the Shock Surplus shop for more shock talk, and today we're talking about the Fox 2.0s. Now, these are probably the most comfortable thing we recommend without spending a fortune, that still retains at least some semblance of stability and is built to a standard you can have faith in on or off-road. Now, in some applications, you might be able to spend 2-3 times the price and maybe get something that bolts on that is a little bit more comfortable than these. But for most vehicles and for most budgets, this is about as comfortable as it gets. Now, you'll see here there's 3 different kinds of Fox 2.0 Performance Series shocks, and there's 3 model lines for most vehicles they're available for. Starting off on the left, we have the 2.0 IFP, the 2.0 Reservoir, and the 2.0 CD adjustable. So we'll be going over these options to see which is going to be the best for you. Now, overall, the 2.0 in the Fox 2.0 name indicates they are a 2-inch body. The Performance Series means they're designed to give you a little bit more performance. But being only a 2-inch body, this isn't a shock you're going to be sending through the skies every weekend. But will still work great off-road if you're keeping speeds more reasonable. So if you have something that you're rock crawling, maybe some light mudding, trail riding, overlanding, that kind of stuff, these are a killer shock, and oftentimes more than most people need. They are all aluminum bodies, which means if you're in an area that salts the roads during your winters, you won't have to worry about at least the shock bodies. Shafts are still steel, but if you keep those clean, you'll be in the money. So which option is going to be right for you? Starting off at the bottom with the 2.0 IFPs, you get all the great ride comfort that you might see from the more expensive reservoir adjustable shocks, but in a obviously less expensive and more simple package. Obviously, there's still a 2-inch body, and although the aluminum does dissipate heat better than steel does, this is a shock that could be overwhelmed over extended serious off-road abuse. That said, if you're mostly driving on the street, you're taking it easy off-road and you're not doing super long runs off-road or towing off-road, these are great. Like I said, for most applications, these are linearly valved, which allows them to have really solid small bump compliance, big bump support, and are a great choice if you are just looking to soften the ride on your truck or SUV without sacrificing stability or too much stability. Now, the flaw with most linear shocks is they're not that great under the load, but there is a solution for that we'll get to later. We aren't saying that the old 2.0 IFPs don't work off-road. They work great off-road, but 2-inch body shocks are limited in how much oil they have. The body's only so big. So they will still have issues with heat dissipation and effectively will still fade on long trail runs. If you are serious about going off-road, you are building a rig to take you down the trail, and that trail might take all day, you're going to want the additional heat dissipation of an external reservoir, and will want to step up into the 2.0 Performance Series reservoir shocks. Now, valving between both of the IFP and the reservoir shocks is, if not identical, so close most people can almost never tell the difference, at least on base ride quality. Most of what you're gaining is heat dissipation, and how that really works is the IFP in 2.0 IFP is internal floating piston, or also known as a dividing piston if you're familiar with Bilstein. That piston divides the oil and the gas and is usually housed all in this one body, which means all that space for the nitrogen charge is taking up available real estate in the shock body. By moving the IFP and gas charge into the reservoir, you gain all of that space for oil, and so basically more oil means more heat dissipation, which means they stay cooler and will be more consistent. Whereas you'll have to take lots of breaks with the 2.0 IFP as you're going down the trail to let them recover when they boil the oil, which happens pretty quick. These should make it down through most even gnarly rock trails, even if it takes all day. Your shock should still feel mostly the same as when you started off on the trail. Now, if you're ripping fast, none of these 2.0s are probably for you, but for the average off-road driver, you can get a full day out of these without noticing any serious fade, obviously, if you're easy on the skinny pedal. The other benefit to a reservoir design is, as I said, you gain all that real estate in the body, which lots of times equates to more usable suspension travel. A great example is on TJ, JK, and JL Wranglers, and even JT Gladiators, your Jeep guys. A lot of times the compressed length on the IFP and remote reservoir shocks are the same, but because you gain all that room in the body, the extended length is often longer on the remote reservoir shock. In English, you're getting more droop travel without sacrificing bump travel, which we love to see. And if you're building a rock crawler or something that's going to be flexed out a lot, travel is something you're probably real interested in. The other benefit is they give you these nice billet brackets. A lot of times they are these that mount the shock reservoir to the shock body, but if your vehicle takes a mount or this mount doesn't work, they do still give you mounts to mount your reservoir, so you have nothing to worry about there. Now, I will really want to reiterate, valving is largely, if not the same, close enough to the same where most people don't notice the difference between the IFP and the reservoir shocks. So if the goal is to just get better baseline ride quality out of the reservoir, save your money. You're doing this for either more usable travel or, most importantly, heat dissipation. If you're driving down the trail and you notice a marked degradation in your ride quality from the first obstacle to the last obstacle, even if it starts off bad and it gets worse, you probably want that reservoir because you are experiencing fade due to heat. A secondary benefit of the remote reservoir design allows for a separate pathway where we can control oil flow or effectively tune the shock more. Thus brings us the 2.0 CD adjustable 2.0s, which have 10 clicks of low speed compression adjustment. And I can't begin to express to you how critical that is on a linear shock. Previously, we talked about how these 2.0s may not be the best under a load, but these are great. And that is simply because that super soft compliant ride we were talking about, when you're unloaded, starts to be too soft, too loose, and unstable when you are loaded down. We've had a lot of customers complain that the standard 2.0s, they get a little bit of that porpoise action, but the 2.0 CDs fix that. Essentially, you can stiffen them up under a load, soften them up when unloaded, and it makes them great. So even if you're not beating on your rig hard enough to necessitate a reservoir, if you're towing a lot and still want a super comfortable ride unloaded, these 2.0 CDs are pretty hard to beat. Now, the reason why that low speed compression adjustment is so beneficial on a linear shock and why those linear shocks aren't that great under a load is that a linearly valved shock responds in stiffness relative to the rate of compression or rebound. That means on high speed compression, they're stiff. You hit a big bump, they give you that support. On low speed compression, they're soft because they are responding relative to the rate of motion within the suspension. Now, low speed compression is responsible for most of your handling balance and initial ride feel. So anytime you as a driver put in an input into the vehicle, you turn the steering wheel, you hit the brakes, you hit the gas, whatever, how much the suspension responds is directly relative to how stiff low-speed compression valving you have. Now, the inherent issue with a linearly valved shock is that curve is a straight diagonal line. And if you want to add low-speed compression into the base valving, you got to bring the whole curve up. By having a separate circuit for low-speed compression flow, you can bring up compression dampening just in that range without sacrificing the great comfort and support you get in the high-speed side of the curve. An additional benefit is you can really use these to lock down handling. A linear valve shock, like we've been saying, isn't the best handling option, but does ride great. If you have a rock crawling build or that doesn't run sway bars, or you've built something real tall, having that additional low-speed compression adjustment can be critical to dialing back in your handling without sacrificing comfort, particularly in articulation events. So you got her flexed out. If, let's say, you have something super soft, doesn't have sway bars, you can still dial in a little bit more low speed compression to keep the cab more flat without really sacrificing any articulation. So you get less of that floppity flop while you're going through the rocks, and that should net you more traction. So overall, you may not need this remote reservoir designed for its intended or initial purpose, but adding that adjuster can make a world of difference. Now there's 3 shocks on this table. They're all 2.0, so what's right for you? I think the vast majority of people will probably be happy enough with the 2.0 IFP. They're very comfortable, they're very compliant, and will still work off-road. Now, if you are spending a lot of time on the trail, you're not just going off-road by proxy, you're doing it for fun, it's actually your hobby, you'll want the extra endurance of the 2.0 Reservoir, because the 2.0 IFPs are gonna get hot, go into hysteresis, and melt down. Now, if you need that additional adjustment, whether you're carrying variable load that you want to stiffen up when you're loaded and soften things up when you're unloaded, you've built something super tall that you need more stability than your average linear valve shock can set you up with, or you might pull your sway bars on and off on the trail, you'll want the CD adjustable shocks. We have tons of people snagging the remote reservoirs, thinking they're gonna get something more out of it. And yes, you do get more heat dissipation, but 9 times out of 10, your shocks weren't getting hot in the first place, and valving is the same on both. For most people, if you're looking for something more than the regular 2.0 IFP, you probably want to jump into the 2.0 CD for the adjustability. There is a chance you may or may not need that reservoir, but for more people, we find that the adjustability is more important than the heat dissipation, and you happen to get both when you get the 2.0 CD. Now, these are all great shocks, and we are here to help you find the right choice. So, if you have questions about anything on this table or anything else we sell, make sure to leave us a comment, hop on shocksurplus.com and shoot us an email. Otherwise, we'll see you out on the trails.